But did you understand the stories? You understood the stories. It's easier to understand than to speak, right? Always. But I want to encourage you, take one of the stories that I told today, either the one about the wide-mouthed frog or the one about todo nada, all or nothing, or the one about the house that was worth a lot more money because the neighbors were good, or this last one about priming the pump, whether you drink the water or put it in the pump, or the lady or the tiger. Pick one of those stories and practice it so that you could tell it to someone. I think that depending on who the listeners are, that one of those stories might seem the most appropriate. So here is a story that also comes from the desert. A man was in the desert for many days. He had a water bottle, but the water was long gone. He was hot, he was tired, and he was thirsty. Finally, he saw a little hut. That gave him hope. He went inside, and inside was a pump for water. Oh, he was so happy. He began to pump and pump and pump and pump. Nothing. But then he saw in the corner of the room a little bottle of water with a cork in it, so it would not evaporate. He grabbed the bottle of water and he took off the cork and he thought, I will drink this. But then he saw a note, some writing that said, don't drink the water, pour it into the pump and the pump will work. This is a problem. He has to make a decision. He's got a bottle of water and a note that says, pour the water in the pump. But what if he pours the water in and the pump still doesn't work? He will die of thirst. So, question for you. Drink the water or pour the water in the pump? What would you do? It is an interesting story for that reason. It is a dilemma. It is a problem. Can you trust the note? Will it work? Maybe it won't work and you will have no water at all. So, what would you do? That's a question. Drink the water or pour it on the pump? He pours the water into the pump. He pushes the handle. At first, nothing. And then the water comes gushing out. And he has plenty of water. He drinks and drinks and drinks and drinks and puts more water in the bottle.
Yes.
And at the bottom of the note, he writes, it works. Do it. And then he finds a map to a town not far away. So he is saved. This is an interesting story. Not so much for little kids, but it is an interesting story for adults because, well, I don't know. What do you think? What is the point of the story? How do you decide? Maybe you have heard there was a study many, many years ago. They would take a child about 3 years old in a room and a small plate with one marshmallow. Do you know what a marshmallow is?
Yes. Yes.
One marshmallow. They would say to the child, you can eat this marshmallow. You can eat it right now. We will leave. You can decide. But if you can wait for 5 minutes, then we will give you 2 marshmallows. What do you think they did? They videoed it, the whole thing, every child going. And many children would just pick up the marshmallow and some would go, very hard to wait for 5 minutes. But in a way, it's the same kind of story. Can you delay your gratification with the idea that if you wait or if you follow directions, if you take a chance, the reward could be better? It is interesting to think about. And even small children face those decisions all the time. And grown-ups, of course, always face the decision, right? Do you do the thing that gives you a reward now? Or if you get more schooling, if you follow the instructions, if you get good advice, if you do something else, will the outcome be better for you? Can you be patient enough for that outcome? So this is a kind of a story that would be interesting to tell to someone who that you may be working with, that you're trying to convince you should put this off and get more later and be more successful later. All you have to do is be patient and follow good advice or instructions. An interesting story about that. Could you tell that story, do you think?
Yes,
they have videos of that. The poor man, so thirsty. Yeah, they have videos of that. And sometimes, so there are 2 ways to end the story, right? If you were telling the story, you could ask your listeners, what would you choose? And that would determine how you end the story. And he just drank the water and then he died. Or he primed the pump. That's what they call it, right? Prime the pump. And there was plenty of water and he lived.
Yes.
Do you know the books that they had several years ago called Choose Your Own Adventure? And it would come to a decision place and you could make a decision and then that determined the outcome. That determined the ending. Happy ending, sad ending, different ending depending on the decision. And that is a good strategy, storytelling strategy for adults and for children. And if you know that story, that old story, maybe you also know a similar story. Do you know the story of the lady and the tiger? It is an interesting story. From ancient Rome, there was the emperor's daughter, and she fell in love with a poor man, but he was arrested and taken into the Colosseum. And sometimes in the Colosseum, they would have to fight to see who would survive. But in this case, would say 2 doors. Behind one door is a tiger. Behind the other door is a beautiful woman. If you choose the door with the woman, then you can marry her right now and go away alive. If you choose the door with the tiger will run out and eat you up and you will die. So the man, he was in love with the emperor's daughter who was sitting in the stands. And he thought, she loves me. She will give me a clue which to choose. They said, choose door number 1, door number 2. And he looked up at her and she moved her finger just a little bit that way. And without pausing, he walked over to the door that she had indicated and opened it. And the end of the story is this. What was behind the door? Was it the lady or the tiger? What do you think? It's a difficult decision, right? Yes. And this one is life and death. She loved him. She would want him to live, but if he chose the door with the lady, he would marry the lady and not her. That is it. And the story, the way the person wrote it, Frank Stockton, long ago in the 1800s, that's the end of the story. What was behind the door, the lady or the tiger? This is not a good story for 3-year-olds, but it is a good story for teenagers or for adults. What would she have told him to do? What would be behind the door? So what do you think? All right, let's see what you think. How many of you think, do you think that it would be the lady? Raise your hand if you think it would be the lady. Do you think it would be the tiger? You think it would be the tiger? Do you all think it would be the tiger? Here's my experience. When I tell that to teenagers or young adults, 20s or so, if I ask the men say, it would be the lady. She wants him to be happy. She wants him to live. She would have him marry someone else so that he could be alive and happy. But the women, they almost always say, no, it would be the tiger. It is an interesting question, right? You think if you were in her position, what would you do? And he was confident that she would choose the right thing. He thought that she would choose the lady. Maybe not. Maybe not. So that is a short, very short story too. So unlike with the wide-mouthed frog, which is good for small children, this is a story for older children or adults. And I think you would be interested to see what they would say, the lady or the tiger. So anyway, I think our time is almost up. Do you have questions or comments for me about any of the stories or any of the storytelling or story listening? Well, it's very hard in a language that is not your native language. I was just in Germany. It was very hard. I do not, my German is not very good. But did you understand the stories? You understood the stories. It's easier to understand than to speak, right? Always. But I want to encourage you, take one of the stories that I told today, either the one about the wide-mouthed frog or the one about todo nada, all or nothing, or the one about the house that was worth a lot more money because the neighbors were good, or this last one about priming the pump, whether you drink the water or put it in the pump, or the lady or the tiger. Pick one of those stories and practice it so that you could tell it to someone. I think that depending on who the listeners are, that one of those stories might seem the most appropriate. If you're talking to grown-ups, I would probably pick the lady or the tiger just to see what they would say, to see if what my experience is what you would find out. That the men would always say, oh, she loves me, she would want me to live. And the women would say, nope. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to my stories. I want you to be brave and tell a story, even if it's to your cat or the wall or something, but tell it out loud. Make sure that you hear that story coming out of your mouth, because that's the way that you will get better. And it will improve your English, and it will also improve your storytelling. So thank you for listening to my stories. I hope they have been interesting to you.